Senate Democrats will formally introduce today the long-anticipated Senate climate bill, the Boxer-Kerry cap-and-trade bill. Sponsored by Senators Barbara Boxer and John Kerry, this draft at 801 pages long largely mirrors the House-passed Waxman-Markey bill, with a few exceptions. The Senate bill has a slightly more aggressive short-term target for cutting greenhouse gases, and there are fewer restrictions on the EPA as far as CO2 emissions. Clean Sky's Tyler Suiters will be on Capitol Hill for today's unveiling of the bill. And Tyler, what we're seeing right now is really just a draft.
Right, Susan, and let's be clear, this is the second draft version we've seen. The first one came out yesterday at roughly 680 pages. As you mentioned, this draft is 801 pages, and now there's word that the version that will be released today by Senators Boxer and Kerry will be a third version. Presumably, we can begin calling it the Boxer-Kerry bill at this point. Now, you referenced the emissions targets. I want to show you exactly what Boxer-Kerry lays out in terms of emissions cuts over the next 40-plus years. First of all, a 20% cut from 2005 levels by the year 2020. Now remember, Waxman-Markey began with a 17% cut. However, the original bill, the draft version from those two House members, started with a 20% cut at 2020. That then went down to 17% during House negotiations among committee Democrats. Like Waxman-Markey, the next two cuts are the same, 42% by 2030, 83% by 2050, and those are the numbers recommended by the U.S. Climate Action Partnership, that major coalition of business, industry, and also environmental groups that rolled out their target goals back in January. Also, another major issue here regarding the issue of potential regulation of CO2 emissions through the EPA. Boxer-Kerry has no restrictions in its current version, or at least the first draft that we saw, regarding the EPA's potential regulation of CO2. Also, there's an issue about indirect land use. In Waxman-Markey, that bill included a 6-year wait before the EPA can consider indirect land use issues regarding the renewable fuel standard. Susan, there is no such restriction in Boxer-Kerry, although maybe that will be a bargaining chip if and when this bill goes through various committees. Most pertinently here would be the Agriculture Committee at some point.
Now, Tyler, one major area the bill does not address specifically is emissions allocations. This is just one of several placeholders in the bill?
Exactly, Susan. No specific numbers regarding allocations here. The House version begins with a 15% auction of emissions credits. That is, 15% will be auctioned to begin with. The Senate version, the second one that came out late yesterday, includes a 25% auction, but again, no specifics on which industries get what free allocations to begin the system. Yesterday, I talked to a key player on both of these committees involved, both Barbara Boxer's Environment and Public Works Committee and John Kerry's Foreign Relations Committee. This is Senator Ben Cardin. He is a subcommittee chairman on the Environment Committee, and we discussed the fact that there are so many open-ended issues included in Boxer-Kerry at this stage. There are a number of placeholders in this legislation. Good idea or bad idea, and that there are so few details right now, but it leaves so much open for the markup?
Oh, I think it's the only way this bill is going to make it to the finish line. You can't do all your negotiations in public. There are a lot of interests out there. Bottom line is we want to reduce carbon emissions. We want to do it in the most cost-effective way. We want to make sure consumers are protected, first and foremost. And secondly, we want to make sure we have the infrastructure in place to continue those goals. And I think by allowing the process to develop as the bills are introduced and work their way through the different committees and the floor of the United States Senate is the best process to follow.
Senator Cardin tells me he will be there at 11:30 this morning for the rollout of the Boxer-Kerry bill. Presumably, every Democratic member of Barbara Boxer's EPW committee will be there as well, including Arlen Specter. He was viewed as being on the fence about this. He is apparently scheduled to be there for today's rollout, most likely indicating he will support the legislation in its current, albeit vague, form. Also, Susan, an interesting note, we talked yesterday about Ben Cardin's repeated use of protecting the American consumer language, something we expect from Democrats. Also appearing at today's rollout, two members that should underscore the connection with national security here. One, a retired vice admiral, the other, a veteran of the Afghanistan war. So that could be another potential selling point for Democrats as it goes to the American public, Susan.
So, Tyler, Boxer promised this bill back in last December. So does it seem like this is a result of all the wrangling over Waxman-Markey and just how much that impacted this bill?
Oh, it's clear there's a strong influence here, Susan. I talked to Barbara Boxer back in May following one of her committee hearings, and she said that, yes, she was closely following the negotiations that were underway in the House at that time, and the reference meant the Democratic negotiations among members of the Energy and Commerce Committee where Waxman-Markey originated. But there are clear differences from the ACES Act as well. I want to show you just a few of them. First of all, Boxer-Kerry would have the CFTC regulate carbon markets. Remember, in Waxman-Markey, the duties would be split between the CFTC and also FERC. Another issue, natural gas could be a big winner under this bill as a bridge fuel, and we're talking about electricity generation here. Incentives both because it is a lower form of emissions in terms of generating power, also incentives as a backup to intermittent generation. You can read that as a backup to renewable sources, baseload for wind or for solar. Also, there are incentives for the nuclear industry as promised, but it basically involves moving reactors into the 60 to 80-year lifespan range, including funding for the NRC to do just that. Now, Barbara Boxer earlier this month promised nuclear incentives included in here, presumably because Tom Carper, a Democrat in her committee, a subcommittee chairman as well, is very strong on nuclear, as is Joe Lieberman, who could bring some people on board. But Susan, Lieberman also told me he wants major incentives for coal. All that's in there so far are vague references to future funding of carbon capture and storage research. But again, it's a placeholder. No real specifics laid out just yet, Susan.
Okay, Tyler Sudich, we'll hear more from you throughout the day and at 4 p.m. on the Eastern Report, on the Energy Report at 4 as that bill is unveiled. Thank you.
Certainly.